Engaging with comments on my videos is an incredibly rewarding experience, I must say. One that offers a window into the vibrant community that surrounds me. Each interaction is a chance to delve deeper into the diverse perspectives that enrich my understanding, especially when it comes to interpreting biblical texts, both theologically and scholarly, academically, that is to say. One of the greatest joys of these exchanges is the opportunity to hear from others. Every comment brings a fresh viewpoint, a unique interpretation, or a personal story that broadens my own perspective. It's like a wall hanging of shared wisdom where each thread adds color and depth to my understanding. Now, in my recent video exploring whether Abraham ventured south into Africa after arriving in Egypt, I received numerous comments, good ones, and have selected two to discuss further. I also want to use this opportunity to stress the importance and also to emphasize the importance of listening thoroughly before reacting. Personally, I review materials at least 4 times minimum before offering any feedback. Before addressing the comment, let's revisit the latter part of my video, which the commenter might have overlooked. His method should have been to grasp the statement fully and then seek clarification, if there was any, before rushing to conclusions. I'm grateful for this comment actually, as it provides an opportunity for a valuable teaching moment. Let's listen in to my statement at the latter part of my video. Some will say, as I've read from some comments, that the name Negev did not exist for the region between the 1500s and the 2000 BCs. However, it's important to note that the text was actually penned down during the Persian era. This story that we are reading about Abraham is coming from the Persian era. It's not coming from the 1500s or the 2000 BCs. I delve into this fascinating historical context in my course titled Abraham, the Invention of an Ancestor. For more details on that, check out the link in the description box below. There you have it. What did I say? I said that some will say, as I've read from some comments, that the name Negev did not exist for the region between the 1500s and the 2000 BCs. However, it's important to note that the text was actually penned down during the Persian era. This story that we are reading about Abraham is coming from the Persian era. It's not coming from the 1500s or the 2000 BCs. So I'm on record saying that this material that we are reading was penned down during the Persian era. Observe that I situate the author of the narrative in the Persian era rather than the 2000s to 1800s, the time frame where scholars typically will place Abraham. or even Moshe to the 13th century BCE. Why is this distinction important? Let's read the first comment and then I'll address it. The comment reads, I am sorry, but this is a hot mess. You criticize Ron Dalton. He forgot to bring the junior, so I'll bring it for him. You criticize Ron Dalton Jr. for deception over the wives issue. I don't think I did. I didn't say it was deception. Your fault is greater and is very deceptive. Maybe it was an error and that is okay, or it is meant to deceive. You base your whole presentation on a gross error over a map. Interesting. Pay attention here. There was no southern or northern kingdom when Abraham lived. This map you use comes from after King David's time. OMG, why would you use that? Look up a map on Google for Egypt in Abraham's time and use that. There was no Israel, meaning that Jacob/Israel had not even been born. There is no map from Abraham's day showing Bethel or Shechem or Negev. Okay, let's pause here. Here are the points raised. Number 1, the presentation is founded on a significant map error. Number 2, no southern or northern kingdoms existed during Abraham's time. Point 3, the map is from a period after King David, questioning its relevance. Point 4, suggest using historical maps of Egypt from Abraham's era found online. 5, Israel did not exist then, as Jacob/Israel hadn't been born. And then number 6, maps from Abraham's time don't show Bethel, Shechem, or the Negev. Very interesting, very interesting. Now, the commenter raises intriguing questions and accusations, I must say. The accusation is of using anachronistic data. That is what the accusation is. I am accused of using anachronistic data. Okay, let's do this. Let's shift our focus to Abraham for a moment. I'm sure the scholars watching me are giggling in their seats because they know what is coming. Let's keep this scholarly, critical, no dogma here. I want you to turn your Bibles to Genesis 24. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh, that I may make you swear by Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of heaven, the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell, but you will go to the country and to my kindred and take a wife for my son Isaac. Let's jump to verses 10. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. Okay, most of you listening to me don't know the issues with this statement. So let me enlighten you. The statement seems very innocent, but there are issues here. Camels are mentioned here, which makes the narrative problematic. The camels mentioned here are used as beasts of burden. Archaeological evidence revealed that camels were not domesticated as beasts of burdens until the late second millennium, and were not commonly used in this way in the ancient Near East until well after the 10th century BCE. This is a millennium away from Abraham's traditional dating. Let me repeat that again. Maybe you did not get the point. The text tells us that Eliezer took 10 of Abraham's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master to bring to Mesopotamia, Haran, in search of a wife. What am I telling you? What does the evidence show? Archaeological evidence revealed that camels were not domesticated as beasts of burden until the late second millennium, and were not commonly used in this way in the ancient Near East, our location, until well after the 10th century, 1000 BCE. Look at the time frame for Abraham. This is a millennium away from Abraham's traditional dating. 1,000 years away from Abraham. So now, let's address the commenter's comment by directing it to the biblical author. You remember what his comment was? Let's turn around and face the biblical author and pose these same questions to him. Probably her. Biblical author, I am sorry, but this is a hot mess. Maybe it was an error, and that is okay. Or it is meant to deceive. You base your whole presentation on a gross error over timelines. There was no domesticated camels when Abraham lived. This information you used comes from 1,000 years later. OMG. Why would you use that? Notice how the commenter's criticism unravels. His focus should be on the biblical author, not on me. Let's map this on a timeline for a clearer visual reference. Abraham is traditionally dated to 2000 or 1800 BCE. But evidence suggests that the camels he supposedly sent with his servant Eliezer to Haran were domesticated and used as beasts of burden only by the 10th century. a millennium away from Abraham's traditional dating. Someone is in trouble, and it's not me. Let's focus on the camels for a moment. While we give Abraham a break, let's turn our attention to Joseph, as camels also appear in his story. Genesis 37:23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Another problematic text, unknown to most. A particularly revealing detail is the camel caravan transporting gum, balm, and myrrh. This detail here indicates a clear awareness of the key products from the lucrative Arabian trade that thrived under Assyrian rule when, during the 8th to 7th century BCE. There is a dig. It's called Tel Jemeh. This was a key caravan route between Arabia and the Mediterranean. This dig revealed a significant rise in camel bones from the 7th century. These bones, predominantly from mature animals, indicate they were traveling beasts of burden rather than local herds. It was during this period that Assyrian records first mentioned camels as caravan pack animals. It was during this period, again, we're looking at the 8th to the 7th century BCE. It was during this period that Assyrian records first mentioned camels as caravan pack animals. Let's get some more data. Displayed on your screen is a bronze inscription from Southern Arabia, detailing trade between South Arabia and the towns of Judah. This inscription, composed in Sabian, the language of the South Arabian kingdom of Sheba, what we call Sheba or Sebia, and nearby regions, utilizes the South Arabian alphabet. The text author, named Sabahumu, hails from the South Arabian city of Nashik and served as a messenger for the king of Sheba. Not the queen, but the king of Sheba. The inscription narrates a significant trade expedition to DIDN, Gaza, and the towns of Judah. When is this dated? It is dated approximately to the late 7th century BCE, placing it in the 6th century. It's getting interesting. In Assyrian records from the late 8th and 7th century, there are mentions of Arabian queens, which is where the story of the Queen of Sheba coming to Solomon finds its historical roots. But pause for a second. There is a chronological issue to consider. Solomon is traditionally dated to have reigned in the 10th century BCE, from around 970 to 931 BCE. So, how could the Queen of Sheba meet Solomon in the late 8th to 7th century BCE where we have Assyrian records mention of Arabian queens. How is that possible? The author is in trouble. This scenario aligns more closely with the era of King Manasseh in the 7th century BCE, raising intriguing questions about historical timelines. So the first commentator was asking about timelines. Oh, you've messed up. Oh, Abraham's time, there was no north and south. He forgot that he has to pose that question to the biblical author before he turns to me, even if he needs to. Let's get some more data. This is getting interesting. Abraham, we are told, has an encounter with Abimelech, who is identified as the king of Gerar. Abimelech was a Philistine king. Put that in your spirit. We are told Abraham sojourned to Gerar. So Gerar must be important to have a mention in this narrative. Genesis 20, what do we read? And Abraham traveled from there to the land of the south, and he dwelled between Kadesh and between Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. Now you come to Genesis 26, we are told, and there was a famine in the land, aside from the first famine that had been in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went to Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, to Gerar. Did you know that mentioning the Philistines in connection with Abraham is historically inaccurate? Since the Philistines only emerged around the 1200 BCE, 12th century, well after Abraham's time. During Abraham's era, Gerar would have been a merely small, insignificant village, even if it existed. So why is it referenced in the patriarchal narratives? Let me tell you why. By the late 8th to 7th century BCE, Gerar had evolved into a prominent, heavily fortified Assyrian administrative center in the south, making it a notable landmark of the time. You cannot mention Gerar, you cannot mention the Philistines in the time of Abraham. Abraham is dated when? 2000 to 1800 BCE. And you're talking about Philistines who come on the stage in the 12th century. You're talking about Gerar. That only becomes important, prominent in the Assyrian era, 8th to 7th century BCE. The biblical author has questions to answer, not Rabbi Akwetey. Let's give more data. Take the mention of Ishmael in his genealogy. Genesis 21. Now these are the generations of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, whom Hagar the Egyptian, the maidservant of Sarah, bore to Abraham. And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names, according to their births. And then you get names. I want you to pay attention to 4 of them. Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbeel, and Teman or Teman. Take note of these 4 names. Why am I asking you to take note? Ishmael's genealogy includes several southern tribes that established contact with Judah during the Assyrian period. Let's take them one after the other. Notably, the Kedarites. They are first recorded in Assyrian texts when, in the late 8th century BCE, becoming prominent during Ashurbanipal's reign in the 7th century BCE. Prior to this, they were outside the immediate interest of Judah and Israel. that is the Kedarites. Similarly, groups like the Nebaioth and Adbeel, also North Arabian, appear in Assyrian inscriptions from the same time frame, 7th century BCE. Tamar, linked to the great caravan oasis in northwest Arabia, is mentioned also in the 8th and 7th century BCE Assyrian and Babylonian sources. So these specific references suggest that the genealogical passages were crafted between the late 8th and 6th century BCE, highlighting their historical context. Notice, I keep saying 8th century BCE, 7th century BCE, 6th century BCE, but this guy Abraham that we are looking at is supposed to be sitting in the 2000s and the 1800s. So what is happening here? Let me tell you. The author, who is sitting where? I place him in the Persian era, is presenting history from the 8th and 7th century BCE backdrop while using an archaic style to depict it. What do I mean in clear words? The author is describing events from the 8th and 7th century BCE, but is using an old-fashioned way of telling the story, making it sound like it comes from an earlier time period. He's making it seem like it comes from the 2000/1800 BCE, where Abraham is traditionally dated. So he's moving all this data from the 8th century to the 6th century, and he is moving it and he's telling us that this happened in the time of Abraham. That is what is happening here. The author crafting the story of Abraham isn't depicting a historical figure, but creating an ancestor. Writing during the Persian era, he uses the backdrop of the 8th and 7th centuries, incorporating existing place names and events to seamlessly integrate the ancestor into that historical setting. So the author acknowledges the existence of both a northern and southern kingdom, despite the northern kingdom having fallen and the southern elite being in exile. So by placing Abraham within the context of the 8th and 7th centuries, the author crafts a narrative that unfolds as if it were set between the 2000s and the 1800 BCE, blending historical eras to tell the story. So when he says that Abraham went to Shechem, and then Bethel, then to the Negev, then he goes down to Egypt, and then he returns and comes up to the Negev, and then goes back to Bethel, where he built his altar. The author is sitting in the Persian era. He knows all these place names because it's evidently in the 8th century backwards, and he is framing his narrative. Now you can understand my statement that the commenter missed. This is what I said again. Some will say, as I've read from some comments, that the name Negev did not exist for the region between the 1500s and the 2000 BCs. However, it's important to note that the text was actually penned down during the Persian era. This story that we are reading about Abraham is coming from the Persian era. It's not coming from the 1500s or the 2000 BCEs. The first commenter believed that they had made a valid point, but their questions are better directed at the biblical author, not me. Ironically, they seem to have committed the same oversight they accused me of, failing to grasp the background of the biblical narrative that I've just shared. This is why the second commenter's remark stands out to me. He states, "You need to establish whether Abraham even existed before you have him traveling to Africa." Bingo. This is a crucial point. Before you level your accusations against me, let's first consider the historicity of Abraham. Based on the presentation I've just given, I'm going to ask a question and I'll answer it. Is the biblical Abraham a historical figure? The answer is no. Abraham may be biblical, but not historical. I repeat that. Let me ask the question again. Based on the presentation I've given, is the biblical Abraham a historical figure? No, he's not. Abraham may be biblical, but not historical. Do you want to understand that? You want to take my course on Abraham, the invention of an ancestor. It explains into details. It takes you through the journey of Abraham, not from a theological religious background, but from an academic point of view. So it seems something that was supposed to be a criticism of what I've presented actually happens to be criticizing the biblical author. Again, it is crucial to understand someone's position. It is crucial to listen carefully when information is being presented before you jump the gun to make a criticizing statement, which is allowed. I invite it. I love it when criticisms come so I can hear what others have to say. But this one, no. This one missed the boat. Again, was there a northern kingdom? Was there a southern kingdom? Was there a Negev? Was there Bethel? Was there Shechem in the time of Abraham? If Abraham existed, no, there was not. But the person writing is not writing about a historical Abraham. The person is sitting in the Persian era, and he's writing a narrative. He's creating an ancestor. And what does he do? He takes the historical data that he is aware of from the 8th century downwards. And then he places Abraham, or he puts Abraham in that context. That is what he did. That is why you have the mention of Shechem and Bethel and the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom and the camels and the Arabian trade. That is why all of that is mentioned. Chronologically, it cannot be. He's not writing history. Shalom.